Welcome back to Designing Around Trees. I'm going to be talking about Australian standards and arboricultural best practice. A couple of the standards that you need to know about when you're designing around trees are the Australian standard AS 4970, Protection of Trees on Development Sites. This is the one where we get the TPZ measurements and the SRZ measurements, and it guides us through the whole process of working around trees. I'll also mention a couple of things you need to know about the pruning standard, and I'll talk about other investigations that arborists might recommend during the process of designing around trees. So these are the main standards and code of practice that we use when talking about trees. We've got the AS 4970, which is the protection of trees on development sites. We've got the pruning of amenity trees, AS 4373, which talks about the correct way to prune so that trees remain healthy and structurally sound. And then we've got the amenity tree industry code of practice for working with trees, which covers the safest way to remove and prune trees. So what is the AS 4970? It's the Australian standard for protection of trees on development sites that we use when designing around trees. It was created about 10 years ago, and it's what we use to find the TPZ and SRZ measurements that I've already gone into. We use it as a guideline to tell you which parts of the process needs an arborist, where the trees need to be considered, and how to effectively protect and retain the trees. Some specific examples of what you can find in the standard are, there's a handy table of the different stages throughout the development process, from design through to concept to development application and construction, where you need to involve an arborist, where you need to consider the trees, and what impacts can happen at different stages throughout the development. There are examples and diagrams of different parts of the trees and different things you need to consider, and there's really specific information, so if you need more detailed information about trees, you can consult back to the standard and find the information, as well as engaging your arborist. Another standard dealing with trees that you'll need to know about during the design process is pruning of amenity trees, AS 4373. There are a couple of points that I'd like to make about that. So let's have a look at a couple of examples from the pruning standard. The main thing that I want you to understand from the pruning standard is that correct pruning needs to be done to a specific point. It needs to be done to branch junctions or collars, which is where two stems or two branches meet. And you'll want to prune just a little bit above the collar so that part of the branch remains that can grow over and heal over the wound. So you've left just a small part of the branch that remains that will grow over that part. The other thing to remember is that the branch that you're removing should not be too large. You want the branch remaining to be no smaller than 1/3 the size of the branch that you've pruned off. So next we'll be looking at some other investigations that arborists might recommend during the process. So these are a few of the other investigations that an arborist might recommend during the design process that you should know about in advance that could impact the way you design and what you need to consider during the process. So root mapping is something that we do when we want to know exactly where the roots are and how that's going to impact where and how you can design your structures and services. Another investigation that could be done is decay diagnostic testing. This is to find out whether there's internal decay in the tree and the tree might be in such a poor condition that it's not worth investing in retaining the tree, or it may not survive the whole process. On a similar note, aerial inspection is usually done to find out if there are structural issues at the top of the tree or in the branches. That might mean pruning is needed before anything happens, or it might mean that the tree is again in such poor condition that it's not worth keeping. And lastly, detailed pruning specification could be done if the structures are so close to the building that you'll be removing a large part of the tree, and what the impact of that pruning will be on the overall structure of the tree. So that was an overview of the other investigations and Australian standards that might be needed when working around trees. But the main thing that I want you to take away from this information is to get your arborist involved early so that they can guide you through to avoid the pitfalls and result in healthy trees at the end of the process. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.